gosh, what is it? It's Tuesday, August 4th, 2026. And we left off on Genesis 4, verse 1. So we pick it up right there. Excuse me. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived. Now Adam knew Eve. Oh, they had intercourse. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, and you must rule over it. All right, well, a few questions now. So the first would be, why didn't God take to Cain's offering, but did to Abel? And then in addition to that, I wonder, why? So, okay, well, let's just ask that first. Why do theologians say, allergens say, dang it, theologians say that God took to Abel's offering but not to Cain's? The question of why God accepted Abel's offering while rejecting Cain's is one of the most thoroughly analyzed passages in biblical theology. Because the text of Genesis 4 does not explicitly state God's for reason in a single sentence, theologians examine both the immediate Hebrew text and the rest of the scripture to explain the differences, which at first glance one would think it's probably because Cain was already harboring hate towards his brother, or envy, or something along those lines, I would think. So here we have Cain, he's being a big hater, and there's Abel with his sacrifice. The faith and heart condition of the giver. The primary theological distinction centers on the internal disposition of the two brothers. Acceptance by God is never purely about ritual. It begins with the heart. Hebrews 11:4 states, By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. Abel's offering was born out of genuine trust, reverence, and devotion to God, whereas Cain's lacked true faith. Number 3, the condition of acceptance in God's response. In verse 7, God directly tells Cain, if you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. This implies that Cain already knew what was right or expected, but chose not to do it. So maybe he kept the best fruit for himself so he could eat it and gave God like his kind of mid batch of fruit. God's rejection was a gracious invitation to correction, not a permanent condemnation. Instead of repenting and adjusting his heart, Cain responded with anger, pride, and jealousy. Why did God continue to directly speak to the humans even after they were exiled from the garden? And well, we'll leave it at that. I was saying, when did it stop? But I mean, technically, it never did. Although everybody might not have that privilege to hear directly from God. It's really thinking hard about this one. Okay, let's just go back. Genesis 4, verse 8. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Talking back to the Lord. And the Lord said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Okay, that's verse 16. So why did God protect him? Okay, so it finally answered. We'll answer the next question after this. So why did God continue to directly speak to humans even after they were exiled from the garden? The continuation of divine communication after the expulsion from Eden is one of the most significant themes in biblical narrative. While the fall altered humanity's location and nature of fellowship, it did not end God's engagement with creation. Theologians point to several core reasons why God continued speaking directly to humans outside the garden. Grace and relational pursuit. Let's see, moral guidance and restraining evil. Outside Eden, humanity faced immediate moral vulnerability. Sin was no longer just a hypothetical temptation. It was an active force. So this is what's interesting to me, because when Eve and Adam ate the forbidden fruit, they committed a sin, they disobeyed God, but let's just see if I can muster up a question here. in this verse, it makes it seem like the initial sin, the original sin committed by Eve and Adam, created many other sins. So if the first sin was disobedience, what did that action create? Think that that single action created humans' fallen nature. I'm trying to understand where the many sins came from. Not many. Many is in more than one. The short answer is yes. Theologians overwhelmingly teach that the single act of disobedience by Adam and Eve altered human nature, introducing what is known as original sin or the fallen nature. The single action of taking the forbidden fruit didn't just break a rule, it fundamentally severed humanity's direct harmonious connection to God. That single tear in the fabric of human nature is what allowed many other sins to flood into existence. So I guess what I'm really asking is, what is the origin of sin? If we take it at face value, single tear in the fabric of human nature is what allowed many other sins to flood into existence in this wording, which would imply that it already existed somewhere. It was just being held back. So is that to say that sin in all of its different forms already existed and it was simply being held back, or humanity was being protected from its temptation? And if that's the case, what is the origin of sin? To answer this, theologians distinguish between sin as a created thing versus sin as a corrupt posture of the heart/will. Sin is not a substance or an existing object, like an element or physical object, sure, that God created and kept in a locked box. Instead, standard Judeo-Christian theology defines sin as a privation. What's that? Deprivation, a state in which things that are essential for human well-being, such as food or warmth, are scarce or lacking. Okay. So deprivation. Defines sin as a deprivation of good. Okay. So was sin held back or already existing? But I suppose by that definition, it's really, sin is these are things that don't please God, I guess, really at its most base form. Humanity wasn't being protected from a pre-existing catalog of sins. Rather, in Eden, humans were created with original righteousness and free will, existing in perfect harmony with God. Okay, so So sin always existed. Technically speaking, as soon as free will existed, but before original sin, it was temptation as a burden that humans did not have, that they now do have. I think, in my words, that's how I take it. Okay, you have hit on the precise nuance that theologians wrestle with. The short answer to your statement is yes, with one key refinement. It wasn't that sin existed as a real thing as soon as free will was created, which I would push back against that only because by the time that the humans were already created, Satan had already rebelled, which was a function of his free will. But anyway, okay, so let me just finish reading. Rather, the potential for sin was born the moment free will existed. Prior to the fall, humans did not have the internal burden, bent, or compulsion toward temptation that we carry today. Although I suppose you could argue that even prior to the original sin, I mean, like moments before, if Eve was able to be deceived, but the way that she was deceived, which we read, she was, I mean, the devil played on her temptation. I mean, I guess he gave her temptation because she wanted the wisdom. She wanted to be like God, just like you said. I don't know. It's pretty complex, but interesting nonetheless. The distinction, potential versus reality. To see how theologians view this timeline possibility of sin came into existence when God created creatures with free will, angels and humans. Okay? Actuality of sin came into existence the moment a creature, first Satan, then humans, actually chose to turn away from God. So think of steering. That's okay. We don't need that. Augustine's 4 states of humanity. To explain the change in how temptation and burden felt to humans before and after original sin, St. Augustine formulated a famous theological framework describing the human capacity for sin. Okay, let's see. Eden, before the fall. So we were able to sin, able not to sin. What? Able to sin, able not to sin. Okay, so meaning we still had a choice. Well, Adam and Eve still had a choice at that point. They could have maintained not sinning. And then the original sin happens. And so now we're in the present. After the fall, we are not able not to sin. Meaning by default, we're all born sinners. Fallen is our nature. We require Jesus Christ's sacrifice to be saved. We know this. Okay, so before the fall, Adam and Eve were created with the ability not to sin. They had free will, but their default state was whole, pure, and unburdened. Okay, so that part makes better sense. Their default state was whole, pure, and unburdened. Temptation was entirely external. Ah, I see. That's a good distinction. Okay. Temptation was entirely external. The serpent speaking from the outside. Okay. After the fall, humanity lost that inner equilibrium. We became unable not to sin under our own power. Temptation became an internal burden, an ingrained bias in human nature. Okay. Hence, I suppose, Cain and killing his brother and envy and all that. Okay. All right, so that's interesting. Genesis 4. Oh yeah, and we wanted to ask about, so why did God still protect Cain? Let me just highlight these so I don't lose it. Why did God still protect Cain? The protection of Cain in Genesis 4:15 is one of the early striking demonstrations of grace intersecting with divine judgment in the biblical narrative. God did not spare Cain from the consequences of his crime. Cain was cursed from the ground, forced to become a restless wanderer. Wait a minute, I just had a much more pressing question. Although this is we'll come back to that. But so Cain says, like at this time, Adam and Eve are the only human beings, and then they have two sons, Cain and Abel. Right at this up to this point, at least from I'm just saying straight out of up to this point in Genesis 4, what we know, if we take the Bible at face value. But Cain says, he just said it, or was it? So, okay, Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. But who is whoever? Who else was there? Now that I need to know. So let's see. Copy. When Cain says, whoever finds me will kill me, who is he referring to? Were not he, Abel, Adam, and Eve the only humans up to this point? I wish Apple would apply some of that AI to their talk to text. That'd be great. Maybe the new Siri will have it. Okay, this is one of the most common questions when reading early Genesis. While Genesis 4 mentions only Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel by name up to this point, the text and context provide a few key answers to whoever refers to. So significant time had passed. All right. The story of Cain and Abel does not take place immediately after their birth. Okay, sure. Both men were grown adults with established occupations. Cain was a farmer and Abel was a shepherd. By the time Cain killed Abel, decades or even a century may have passed since Adam and Eve were created. So this brings up another obvious question, which, even if that's the case, who did they have sex with to procreate? Like, did Cain and Abel sleep with their mother? Or did Adam and Eve have many other children that I guess spread about the world, or spread across the lands, and that's who Cain was referring to? Maybe we'll ask, but we'll finish this part. Okay, other children and rapid population growth. Genesis 5:4 explicitly states the days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Oh, I see. Okay, so okay. During the early generation described in Genesis, human lifespans were extremely long, 800 to 900 years. Can you imagine living that long? That would mean I'd be like 8 years old right now or something, by contrast. And families were large. Over several decades, Adam and Eve's children would have had children of their own, leading to an expanding population of siblings, nieces, nephews, and cousins, which, I mean, you can kind of say, that's gross or whatever, but these were the first humans. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really take it that way, because there's literally no other option, and it was by God's command, to procreate. So, obviously today that's frowned upon, but that's not defending it at all, but I'm just saying that was by God's command that this was. But what I am curious about is whether or not anyone else slept with Eve, not in like a pervy way, but just like, I wonder if that was I don't know what I'm saying. Let's move on. Fear of blood vengeance from relatives. When Cain expresses fear that whoever finds me will kill me, he is fearing retaliation from Abel's other relatives. His extended family, siblings, nieces, nephews, who would naturally seek vengeance for Abel's murder. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Right. So Genesis focuses on specific individuals, not entire populations. Okay, so just so it's said, just to lay it out there. So we can assume that from the telling of Genesis that brothers and sisters, of course, would have had to have procreated together. But only Adam knew Eve. It's like, oh, what are you saying? Come on. Gemini Flash is not flashing tonight. But all right, let's keep reading and then we'll come back. Verse 16, then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. Oh, first mention of Enoch. Okay. Which, after we read the Old Testament, by the way, we'll read Enoch, just to get a full grasp of all. Because Enoch is mentioned, although Enoch, the book Enoch, is not mentioned in the Bible, it is referenced in the Bible, and so I think it would be helpful just to understand what's actually in it instead of postulating or being afraid of whatever. Okay, when he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael, and Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech, and Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. It's a funny name. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech is 77-fold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed me. Sorry. And so I guess this kind of answers the question that I was asking, because at least it's because they're the original humans, and so it points out the next child that she had. So I guess Cain and Abel were the last prior to Seth. So yeah, okay. So that really answers my question. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. Actually, let's see if it responded here. Okay, here we go. Oh no, not that one. Okay, so the question is, so we can assume from the telling of Genesis that brothers and sisters, of course, would have had to have procreated together, but did only Adam know Eve, as in did only Adam procreate with Eve, or did she procreate with her sons? You're right on the first point. Under the literal reading of Genesis, brothers and sisters would have had to marry and procreate to populate the earth. However, the phrase "new" in terms of sexual relations is actually used for others in the Genesis narrative as well. That's not what I'm asking. Okay. I'm asking if we believe only Adam had sex with Eve, or if she had other sons and daughters with her own sons. It's like really digging into the archives for that. I think it's interesting that these take so long, but you ask it about anything else, and it's like lightning. Okay, let's go back while that works on that. Okay, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, called his name Seth, for she said, "God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him." So that, again, that answers the question. So she's saying it directly. So those were their only two offspring until Seth. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Okay, let's see. Okay, so it responded. In mainstream Christian and Jewish tradition, no, the biblical text and traditional theology do not suggest that Eve had children with her own sons. The standard biblical view is that Adam and Eve were the exclusive husband and wife union, which would make sense, just in terms of the paradigm of marriage. Eve had all her children with Adam. The next generation, their children, intermarried with each other, brothers marrying sisters or cousins, nieces, in subsequent generations to populate the earth. Okay, why Eve marrying her son? Actually, we don't need to read that because we just read that. So we know why that's... We have that answer directly from Scripture. Yeah, okay, and then this is worth reading. The one flesh marital principle in Genesis 2:24, the structural pattern for human marriage is established. A man leaves his father and mother. A man leaves his father and mother and holds fast to his wife, becoming one flesh. Adam and Eve were uniquely partnered as the original pair, while their offspring established their own marital unions within their generation. Let's see. Parent-child incest boundaries. While sibling intermarriage was necessary and implicitly permitted early on before the Levitical laws were formally given thousands of years later, parent-child relations, such as a son sleeping with his mother, carry a distinct moral prohibition across Scripture, later formalized strictly in passages like Leviticus 18:7. Oh, so interesting. So we'll eventually read that, but it gets very specific about these things. Okay, so biblical commentators generally view the early repopulation model strictly as brother-sister marriage, not mother-son intermarriage. Okay, well, there you go. Okay, Genesis 5. I'm like wide awake now. This is not bode well for my bedtime tonight. But because I'm wide awake, it's not that long. We'll go ahead and read it. Okay. Adam's descendants to Noah. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. And he blessed them and named them man when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. He fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image. So I'm curious what this means, because how can he, like, what, how would that be any different than when he had Cain and Abel? Like, what's it implying? Like, he gave some special oomph to the one, session that made Seth, or what? Like, what does it mean? What does it mean? Why does the Bible make this distinction? It seems as though it's implying that Adam took some kind of special recourse when creating Seth versus Cain and Abel. Okay, no, I got that right. All right. Paste. Because, it would seem any son that you have is going to be in your likeness and after your image, just because that's how genetics works. The phrasing in Genesis 5:3 that Adam fathered a son in his own likeness after his image does sound distinct, but it does not mean Adam used a special mechanism or process to conceive Seth. Instead, scholars, theologians, and historians view this phrasing as serving several major theological, literary, and structural functions in the biblical text. So first, echoing the image of God. In Genesis 1:26 through 27, God creates humanity in his image and likeness, Tselem and Demu in Hebrew, Demu. When Genesis 5:1-3 recaps creation before introducing Seth, it deliberately reuses those exact Hebrew words. Okay. All right. A theological reset after Cain and Abel. Okay, so at the very least, it was not something, it was outside of, it's more narrative, if anything, than anything that Adam did, which was the question, which actually brings me to my next question that I just thought about. Who is the author of Genesis? Well, God, obviously, inspired by God, but who, the answer depends on whether you are looking at traditional religious consensus or modern historical scholarship. Okay, as the two offer very different answers. The traditional view is Moses, really, that far along. That's really fascinating. Okay, for thousands of years, both Jewish and Christian traditions attributed Genesis, along with Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I guess it wouldn't be, so when he went up on the mountain, they're saying that's when God would have had him write all of these things, so that's not too far out. Okay, along with Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which would make up the Torah, collectively known as the Torah or the Pentateuch, to Moses. We'll just call it the Torah. The logic, Moses was considered the central prophet and lawgiver of ancient Israel who received revelations from God. The nuance, because the events in Genesis, from creation to the death of Joseph, occurred centuries before Moses lived, traditionalists hold that Moses either received the text through direct divine revelation or compiled and edited older oral and written patriarchal traditions under divine guidance. Okay. The academic and historical consensus, multiple anonymous authors. Well, of course, people would. Modern biblical scholarship and historical critical analysis generally conclude that Genesis does not have a single author. Instead, it was composed over several centuries by combining multiple earlier oral and written traditions, a theory known as the documentary hypothesis or its modern variations. Okay. This is interesting. Scholars identified distinct source materials woven together by ancient Jewish editors, primarily over the first millennium BCE, aka BC. It's so stupid that they. Anyway, the Jahist source dated roughly to the 10th through the 9th century BC in the southern kingdom of Judah. It uses the personal divine name Yahweh and portrays God with human-like anthropomorphic qualities. So that's one source of Genesis that was found. The Elohist source, dated around the 9th through the 8th century BC in the northern kingdom of Israel, uses the broader title Elohim for God and portrays God as more distant, communicating through dreams and messengers. Okay. And a third source, the priestly source, dated between the 6th and 5th centuries BC, during or after the Babylonian exile, focuses on order, genealogies, covenants, rituals, and majestic accounts. These diverse strands were eventually compiled into the unified text of Genesis during the Persian period, likely as part of an effort to preserve Israelite history and identity after returning from exile in Babylon. Okay. Let's see. Genesis 5, verse 4. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years. Dang. And he had other sons. So Adam, he died at 930. And he had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years. And he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. 912 years. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. So Adam was 930, Seth 912, Enosh 905. While Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years. He outlived his father. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. That's funny to see that name, just ran Mahalalel and then Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Wait, there's two Enochs. Which Enoch is... Okay, hold on one second. So there is a Enoch mentioned in Genesis 4, and then also an Enoch mentioned in Genesis 5 below. Which Enoch is the one that God took up to heaven and never died physically? In other words, the one that supposedly wrote the book of Enoch. Okay, we'll come back while it thinks about it. Genesis 5. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered. I guess this is our answer. This is the Enoch. So I guess the other Enoch is just not happen to have the same name. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years, a much shorter lifespan. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So, in the other cases, they keep saying he died, he died, he died. But with Enoch, he did not die physically. Enoch walked with God for 365 years. And then suddenly he was not. So he just wasn't on the earth anymore, for God took him. Let me save that. Imagine the privilege. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, "Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands." Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, so now we're on to Genesis 6, and so I think that's a good place to stop for tonight. So we'll pick it up tomorrow on Genesis 6, verse 1. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to drop a sub, share it with a friend. God bless you guys.